Everybody and their mother is asking the same questions right now. How do we use AI to move faster? But I think that's the wrong first question because if your strategy is unclear, AI helps you execute an unclear strategy faster. If your team is misaligned, AI helps you put more out or get more output from a misaligned team, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It's actually not a good thing, definitively. If your way you operate is broken, if your leadership sucks, if you have poor communication, AI doesn't fix that system. It just gives it more speed. It just gives you the ability to kind of budget as it relates to listening to meetings. Oh, you had the transcriber on. You'll catch up the summarization later. Uh, those things aren't necessarily fixed in the advent or leveraging AI. This and that is a second order problem. The first order question is, what can this tool do for me? Or what can this tool do? But the second order question is, what happens to the business, to the team, the customer, and the decision makers after we start using it? And that is what this podcast is all about, is the second order thinking. Welcome to the very first episode of the Second Order Podcast, hosted by me, Nate DInet. As I mentioned, this show is called the Second Order Podcast, and it's all about the layer underneath the most obvious answer. In business and in leadership and in products and technology and in life, most people seem to stop at the most visible or the first visible problem. They'll see an issue and then associate it to it. Revenue is down, so blame sales, or product acquisition is down, so blame the onboarding sequence on the product, or the team is underperforming, so blame the people. When this happens, uh, there's a tendency to kind of stop and get lost in that first reaction, just assuming that you think it's right. And so many discussions that I've had, and you'll see many of those discussions throughout the episodes on the Second Order podcast that I have with the wonderful guests that have joined me, is that it's often way more complex than just the first issue, the first symptom that's surfacing. So that's what we go into. That's what we are especially interested in on this show and honestly in my life. I think it's very topical for a lot of different reasons. Like I mentioned, now with the advent of AI, which is kind of what today's episode is about, a company kind of adopts AI and they just assume that the speed that it provides equals progress. And now, as AI has been around for a while, it's not necessarily the new kid on the block. There's many different sort of renditions of what happens after AI gets adopted. Companies will bring employees back that they let go, or they'll turn down the knob on how often their chatbot or their AI solution will be focusing on the customer experience. I think the companies that are more successful in AI are using them for operational aspects and are getting advanced in that way. But that's a whole other conversation. I'm getting ahead of myself, which will happen a lot on the show because that's just who I am. But the second order thinking always asks these types of questions: is what created this? What happens next? Which I think is a very underrated problem. Like, what happens next? What happens if this is successful, or what happens if this is unsuccessful? Those are two questions that, if you are early in your career or potentially kind of feeling stuck in your career and you want to ask yourself those questions, that will help you level up immediately. Just that one alone. Another question that we think about in second order thinking is, what impact does this have more than just the obvious answer? What around it? Think 360. What does this decision make that's harder, or what does it make more complicated? Thinking about the ramifications after you make a decision on XYZ thing, or like, hey, we're going to invest in this, or hey, we're going to add more people to this, or hey, we're going to build a new team, or hey, we're going to stop production and fix on this bug, or whatever those things are. What does it make harder when we do those things? And in technology, in product, in enterprise levels, a lot of those times those decisions seem so obvious, or those questions seem so obvious. And consultants at Deloitte make $500 an hour by providing the information in those questions, but they really are the difference between a good decision and a wrong decision, or going down a path that will potentially end in catastrophe if you don't consider everything else around. So that's what this show is about. That's what this show is going to explore. And in all my career and all of every team I've been on, product I've been on, company we've been a part of, all of these things, I've noticed this pattern, and I think it's not an advent of a new concept, right? This isn't anything new. I think second order thinking has been around for quite some time. It's stoicism, it's all these different types of philosophies, but thinking about it in a way of this new age and the new way of working, and how people interact with each other is very unique. And I want to gather as many perspectives as I can and share it with the rest of everybody, because I think it definitely can have an impact on your team, on your success, on your company, on your growth, on getting out of being, the bottleneck for your team, or getting out of being in the way for your team. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And that is what we are going to dive into consistently, time and time again. So, like I mentioned, first order thinking is the immediate reaction. And the second order thinking is the consequence to the consequence. Here's an example. First order. We need more meetings for people to stay aligned, which is like, nobody actually says that. Nobody actually says, hey, we're going to need more meetings, or we need more meetings. Everyone fucking hates them. But that is always the default response. That is always the default, like, we're behind, or the project is delayed, or we missed a release, or something bad happened, or we're not communicating effectively. The result is, we need more meetings. And that is always that is all, every team I've been a part of, every organization I've been a part of. And I'm sure the same is for you, is that the knee-jerk reaction is, we need more meetings. But probably not explicitly stated like that, but when something goes wrong, that's usually what happens. Um, but the second order thinking challenges that. And more meetings may actually slow down decisions and teach the team that they need more permission to move, as opposed to actually solving the problem of, hey, this is our decision framework, go and do it and execute. We trust that you can do that. And that is a very challenging. It's exceptionally challenging to actually live from a leadership perspective. It's very challenging to live that philosophy. Think about, the last time you've had a project, and maybe you're in a technology organization and you're trying to ship something out. What is the first thing the CTO or CIO or the VP of technology does? If something doesn't go well, meetings on the calendar all day, every day. It does not. I don't think I've ever been a part of an organization, which is unfortunate, but I don't think I've ever been a part of an organization where the result is, hey, we missed this decision. This is how we got here. Now you need to figure out, or you need to recognize that you are unable to go make this decision and go make them faster. What do you need from me in order to do those things more effectively than you're doing them right now? That's a better, in my opinion, that's a better way of advocating for your team and also increasing efficiency, as opposed to getting status decks, getting, preparation decks, because all of that adds so much godforsaken churn that it impacts everybody around you. So those are the types of problems. Another example is that, hey, maybe you have an employee that's not performing. They are, they're not landing their assignments, or they have been inconsistent when they are working. The first order is that they're just not working out. They're not going to work out. We need to move on. And I've been a part of, I had a VP, an SVP that I was reporting into at the time. This was half a dozen years ago, half a dozen years ago. And the VP was like, should we fire him? I was like, this is the first time I'm bringing this to you. How can that be your first reaction? Like, this is the first time that I'm talking to you about a challenge of a people problem. And your first reaction is just to fire this person. And it was not said in jest. It wasn't like a boys club, like, that's not how this works. It was like, we should fire them because they're not performing up to our standard. It was like, that is insane that that's your first reaction. First off, this person has a family. Second off, you wouldn't even have the full context of what's happening. And that's where second order thinking comes into play, is that maybe the role was unclear, or maybe the feedback loop was weak for this employee, or the manager, maybe I never defined what good looked like for this person. And that was the reason why they started to underperform. And time again, I know that there are many of you that have direct reports. There are many of you that have a challenging dynamic, but really challenging to think about how did you get here? Because it takes two to tango. It takes two to communicate. I've never really seen a perfect communication where you've said everything crystal clear and you've addressed everything perfectly up front. That always sort of naturally progresses or revolves. I get it. You're burnt out. I get it. You're overwhelmed and you're busy. It's not placating. I understand that. But you cannot just expect the employee to do and handle everything perfectly if you haven't been as clear as you maybe should have been, because you as a leader that has the context, you might not be able to, you might not have given everything to them. They're not at the same level as you are. That's why they're not at the same level as a leadership role in the organization. That's just how it works. So I think those those things are what underscore the difference in second order thinking. It's not to overthink everything. I'm not advocating for this anxiety inducing, like, oh my God, let's think about all the different, parallel consequences here. But it's about refusing to confuse motion with progress. It's about refusing to confuse the first thing that comes to mind. I've heard all the adages like the first solution or the easiest solution is not the best solution or whatever those things are. Those terms or phrases that doesn't necessarily apply anymore. Roles and dynamics in psychology and communication and culture is so much more nuanced than any adage could ever account for, that there really isn't a one-stop shop like this will solve it every time. You need to have like a framework, an operating model in order to be able to work effectively and communicate effectively and make decisions effectively. It's no longer the sort of what is that show called, Mad Men era of you know like terrible misogyny and like all of that, like how that's not how the world works really that much anymore. It's not as one dimensional. It's like seven dimensional. So you need to at least consider there are more options than the first one that you were presented with. I think that leads me to this next sort of pontification of why this matters now, is because of where we are, because we're living in a rapid, like a flash economy. I wouldn't even call it a speed economy. It's a flash economy. Everybody wants everything immediately. Think about what we've been conditioned for. All of the checkout experiences that we now have offer 2-day shipping, which I can't even say 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's not really, it's like, oh, we ordered it online, we'll see it sometime. But now it's like, I ordered it just now. Sometimes, some areas you can get it same day, which is like nuts. Like the amount of logistics that would go, you'd have to have, like, kudos to the products teams that brought that to market. Like the amount of logistics and coordination that is necessary to make that happen and for it to consistently happen at scale is insane. But now as consumers, we've gotten addicted to that. So when another site or another organization or another experience doesn't match that exactly, it's like, nah, I'll just get somewhere else. Or why isn't it going to be here sooner? And that thinking bleeds into other aspects of our lives. Why isn't going to be done sooner? Why isn't this software or why isn't this feature developed faster? You have AI, write the feature, write the code. It'll take me 25 minutes to write it. It's a simple feature, just lift and shift. It's just a, matching. There's always a just, and there's always a way of just taking something that is pretty complex and dumbing it down unnecessarily. And that seems to be like our culture because, we're a culture of experts. We have more information at our disposal than we ever had before. And that in turn drives us into faster maniacs of wanting everything immediately. And everything, nothing is ever fast enough when we're thinking about an enterprise dynamic. Everything takes way longer than the expectations are initially. I know it's a grandiose statement, and I recognize that is a lot of like sort of sweeping sort of assumptions in that. But I would say that generally speaking, that's the nature of how the culture of our organizations is shifting in that direction. Maybe not right now, but you can start to see that in decisions that are happening across industries, across the board. And I think people want faster decisions. People want faster hiring. People want faster growth answers. And AI is just pour gasoline onto that fire. Absolutely, poured gasoline on that fire because of how amazing the technology is. It can do a lot of things very quickly. And to be clear, I'm not an anti-AI guy. I'm not gonna. I build with it. I use it. I sometimes sell it. That is very much a point or a portion of my life now is interacting and using it as a tool, similar to when the cloud, or for the cloud for anybody that's in Pittsburgh, or the Western PA area. Um, I am, it's very similar to the cloud back when that was very new, like 25 years ago, when I was first entering into the market. It was a totally new tool. People were using it like not like crazy. People were, ramping up all of the capacity in the cloud without really realizing it. The same thing with people consuming or enterprises. People you're chewing through their tokens like it's nothing. It's such a similar dynamic, and arguably a vastly more intricate and has so much more consequence, the tool of AI versus the cloud does. And that is, I think, That's why I use it as a technology. I'm not, a lot of the times I'll kind of shit on AI or people that use it, but that's not my perspective. I use it as a tool. It's not or it's not how I'm defined as an entrepreneur or otherwise. So anyways, enough of my public service announcement. Um, but I think what AI does is it creates a test for organizations, for leaders, for entrepreneurs, for growing organizations, because it reveals whether your company actually knows what it's trying to do very quickly. Because you can kind of like, the tool will help you get faster for sure. Um, and your weaker aspects of your tech of your organization will be exposed when you start to use it faster. Like, oh, you have all these great ideas. Who's helping with implementation? Who's helping you with delivery? Or how are we actually getting this out the door? Or now you have a bunch of AI agents that are doing all your coding. How are you actually driving people to the actual company? You're spending all this time vibe coding, but how are you actually getting customers in? How are you getting your word out? Like, it'll expose where your systems break down. And those are two very obvious and high level examples. There's a lot more nuance to how it can expose the intricate details between organizations, between teams, between as a founder or as a team that's still growing. Those pieces are definitely going to be impacted and be exposed when you are sort of working up and ramping up. So if your examples continue of, if your manager doesn't know how to coach, AI is not going to help create the trust. If your product team does not understand the customer, AI is not going to immediately give you an insight. These are all sort of things. It'll create more output, but the output is not the same as better outcomes. And I think those things are the most important to consider as you're starting to figure out different ways of leveraging it. So sort of the whole point of this is that when you're thinking about how you can use it, there's a zillion different ways that you can slice that onion. There's a zillion different ways you can build really cool and sophisticated tools and plug into your favorite tools via MCP and have a good interface on your desktop and do all the things a lot faster. But at some point, there will be a wall that you hit. And that wall is going to be difficult to untangle. It's going to be difficult to get through. And yes, you can use AI to try to fight your way through it, but you're inevitably going to need to understand what are your operating systems. What is your overarching like strategic approach to this? That's your strategic approach, not something that, you would ask, GPT to generate for you. So just keeping those things in mind is really what I think is the embodiment of, how we want to leverage, or how you should be leveraging second order thinking as you're starting to grow and as you're starting to really begin to kind of advance. So another quick example from a product perspective. Right now, software is easier than it has ever been to build. You can prototype faster, you can generate code faster, you can create workflows faster, but that creates a pretty, dangerous. I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but it creates a trap in the sense that um, it creates this temptation to build more things. It creates this idea of like, hey, why don't we just shotgun everything out that we've ever thought of and get it out and get people on board as quickly as you can. And you can very easily talk yourself into a situation where, hey, should we build this? Not can we build this? And that's the first order, second order in reverse. So the first order is, can we build this? Yes, you can now, a lot easier and a lot faster than you can now, but should we build this? Are we building the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? What happens if we build this and it pulls us away from the strategy inadvertently? Or what happens if we do this and is not, it's not for the entire customer base, it's just for the squeaky wheel customer or whatever that is. So I urge you to consider that as you're kind of working on maybe the next feature for your organization, your next go to market option for the startup that you're working at, or the founder as a founder. If you've built something, considering these options, like, are we actually taking a step back? Are you actually? When is the last time? I look for it like that. When is the last time that you've sat back and thought, are we building the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? Have we thought about how this fits into our overarching strategy more than just saying, we need to revisit the strategy? Like, have you actually thought about, we need to go from 5 million to 18 million in net revenue by the end of this year? How are we working back from end of year hitting 8 million or whatever that figure I said at the beginning was, what does that actually mean? We need to acquire 5 new customers a month. Okay, what type of customers are the ones that we're going to get? They're the type of customers that we'll find at XYZ demographic, XYZ, sort of things that contribute to how we identify our customers. You've started to shape who your ICP is and then say, okay, where are they likely to get there? How are we actually going to go get them? All of those things are part of your overarching strategy. It goes from high level of like, hey, this is the things, the goal that we need to hit. What's our strategy to get there? Are we growing within our own base? Are we going to get more customers? How are we going to go get more customers? How are we going to go grow in our own base? What are the things that we're going to do to push the envelope? And all of that kind of is netted back into the strategy. So ask yourself, when was the last time you actually opened up the book? When's the last time you did that? Instead of just saying, we can build a lot more faster. Don't get caught in that trap. Think about when is the last time you've actually dug in deep and spend some time with yourself or with your team and actually looking into it and get into some of those second order sort of considerations. And that is why I wanted to kind of start the show, is that I like to understand what the hidden layer of the hidden layer is behind why some teams can scale and other ones shit the bed and they collapse entirely, or why some founders are always in every decision and why others are able to scale out effectively and grow and have this crazy success, or why or how some products totally nail it and then others get consumed into this noisy sort of monolithic amalgamation of features and stuff that thwarts their ability to actually hit their potential, and understanding what that potential could be, or why some leaders can create and how they can create the clarity for their teams and why others are not ever able to do that, and they just create a dependency on them. So um, every episode, whether it is with just me rambling like I am now, or with a guest that I bring on who's a leader at their own organization, is going to look into those patterns. And I can tell you, we have many episodes at the time of me recording this, many episodes in the can, and they're some of the best conversations I've ever had in my life. They are so unique and so much more than, tell me about your business. How is that going for you? No, it's way more. I intentionally do not structure the conversation so that we can talk about things that are important at the time of the recording, things that are not the easy tee up. This is not just a mechanism to, sort of get more notability for the people that are on the show or myself. This is a conversation that I believe is beneficial for the people that hear it. If you're a first time founder, if you're a founder, if you're an executive, or whatever that is, if you have the pains of growing a team, growing an organization, growing a business, whatever that is, these conversations are the ones you want to listen in on, because you'll hear from your peers how they have done it and how they have not, and where they've stumbled and where they've rapidly increased. So those are the types of that's why I built this, so that we could have these moments to be able to reflect in today's society where it's very difficult to really keep everything in front of us and make sure that we're not getting super overwhelmed and caught in the traps of regular living, which is in front of our screens 24/7, notifications 24/7, less than 1 day shipping 24/7, all of those things that seem to overwhelm and create blockages from our second order, and actually leveraging some of that analytic thinking in there. So the big idea that I'll leave you with is that the future is not going to belong to the people that move the fastest. It will belong to the people who can think clearly while everything else gets faster. Speed matters, but without clarity, it creates chaos. AI for sure matters, and it has already impacted the way that we work times a million. It will continue to do that times more millions. But without a clear path, without a clear working mechanism, those things will, you will lose it to noise. Growth matters, but without growth or without an operating system, it's going to fall flat and you're going to, burn some bridges. Leadership matters, but leadership without the ability to have an interaction with your team, without a system or an operating procedure with your team, it's just going to learn or it's just going to blend into chaos. So second order thinking is for the people that think about what happens after this works, what happens next, what are those things that we should be thinking about. So those are the considerations, and that, like I mentioned, is what we're going to explore this entire show as I continue to build it out more, and I'll gather more feedback from the folks that are listening and want to know more perspectives, stories, and other things that lead to that, other examples of second order thinking or not in the news. All of those things will be sort of concluded or included rather in this all encompassing perspective. So thank you so much for listening in on the first episode. And I hope that you definitely tune in because I got some real awesome conversations that are coming down the pipeline with those that have already spent the time with me. And I have even better or even more exciting ones that are coming down the line that are yet to be published. So I have a great sort of first season, if you will, of the Second Order podcast coming out. Every other week, we'll be publishing new episodes, so you'll be able to listen and catch up with it. And I hope that you can think about what the second order thinking is that you need to be doing in your role after after you conclude this discussion, or after you conclude this, listening to this. And with that being said, welcome to the second order, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for listening in.